being here with us to go ahead and dive into lessons learned in Copilot for M365. Going to talk about bridging the gap between technology and people. And so first off, we can all acknowledge that over the course of a year, this technology has been rapidly advancing, right? And we've seen this time and time again. And we can also say for certainty that we've entered a new era, and this is the era of enablement. And so we spent a better part of the decade in what we refer to as digital transformation, getting that data into a digital format. And now our end users are required, demanded to use this new technology and deliver value to the enterprise. And things like automation and low code and AI solutions like Copilot for M365 have become indispensable standards. But the road's not easy. How many raise of hands can agree that we need to embrace AI, but we're not sure quite how to get there? Any hands out there, right? And you're not alone, right? This is a common problem. Careful thought, consideration has to be into it. I'm on a lot of calls where organizations think, well, we'll just throw AI at the loudest problem we have and expect all these issues to be dissolved. But I think what's important is that we're not really ready to understand the work that has to be put into it to make these things successful. And so I'm joined by colleagues here today, Dominick, Raimato, Kristen, Hubler, and they're in the front lines helping organizations get to that success, right? Think about the hard work and the journey. So we're going to kick things off and talk about just that. And that is like, hey, time old scenario, we've got to embrace this. And then there's usually a pause. And then there's another pause. Like, well, how do we get there? And so, Dominick, one of the first things I want to talk about here is what does day one look like? There's an initiative to get Copilot in the hands of end users, but what does that journey look like? And what is associated with that day one launch?
Yeah, and what I think is really important, we make sure we level set here, is when we're talking about Copilot for Microsoft 365, the big differentiator here between that and other large language models is that we're using our data inside of Microsoft 365. So it is our data, our solutions, our security as well. So I think a lot of you that have been either exploring Copilot for Microsoft 365 or thinking about it, probably one of the biggest drivers is the security concern. But if we work back a little bit before that, we actually usually start with understanding the data quality of the environment. And you might say, why do you care about data quality first? Well, the reality is that a lot of us have been storing data in Microsoft 365. We've got gobs and gobs of files, and it's almost like that closet in your hallway that, just kind of has a lot of stuff in it. And you think like, hey, Dominick could take a look into that closet. And also I start looking in and I find all the embarrassing things like your childhood photos, things of that nature, things you don't necessarily want people to see. And what we've found is right off the bat, by just taking some time with some data quality initiatives, we're actually solving some of those security problems as well, because we know what our security issues are today, front and foremost. But when we spend a little bit of time cleaning up some of that older data, we're actually removing some of those security risks as a result, just by taking a little bit of time and cleaning up our state. Then going on, we start looking at what does security look like? Are we using purview? Are we using encryption labels? Are we making sure that things are being properly protected and managed in the environment? And then it's all about making sure that everything is set. I cannot begin to tell you how many customers don't realize that they have to be on the current channel to get the Copilot experience inside the apps. A number of people also don't believe me when I tell them it takes 24 hours for a license to actually come through for the end user experience as well. So you might be able to get in the web earlier, but it takes about a full 24 hours, almost to the minute, for it to show up in the Microsoft Office applications. So all those things need to be considered from a technical perspective when you're starting to go live.
So all these things you just mentioned, I think there's this common misconception though, like there's a lot of problems associated with implementing AI, but I don't necessarily think these problems are created by AI. Have they existed this whole time though, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I don't know how many of you have been here using Microsoft 365. I've been in it for 10 years. I was part of an early launch with a company in central Pennsylvania, and I've been using the tool ever since. If you remember what enterprise search looked like in Microsoft 365 10 years ago, it was horrible at best. horrible at best. But the indexing has gotten better over the years. And now you've got this new tool. And what we're really doing is we're taking a problem that exists, and we're now shining a huge bright spotlight on this and realizing, hey, look, we didn't secure our data well. We didn't protect it. And now all of a sudden, we're running into problems that could easily be resolved with just a little bit of effort if we had done it earlier. So to your point, these aren't new problems. These are problems that have existed and continue to plague the enterprise. But now it's just becoming easier to identify where those problems are.
Because it's always been there. Now
Right.
we're just opening the door.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and these problems scream to me a lot of being technical in nature, but I think we've seen time and time again, that's only half of it. And Kristen, you know, like when we talk about the era of digital transformation, and then like we have been plunged in this era of enablement, not all the checks have been there. And I think a big focus is our end users and that human aspect and helping them with the right approach and the right tools.
Yeah, well, and it's funny when we look at this with day one, everyone is having the security conversation right now. Everyone's thinking about that, but training and adoption, change management, that's always the afterthought. You know, so people think, okay, we're 3 weeks away from go live. Oh, wait, we need some training. But really, there is so much that needs to happen before for that training to be effective. And that's always been the case with technology, but especially with AI. Because what saves one end user time and gets that ROI is going to be completely different from someone else. And so if you want that training to be effective, we need to work backwards from that start, right? So we need to be considering, what does that training look like? What are those personas? You know, that's a change management term you've probably heard. When I say persona, I'm talking about key people at your organization and how they work and what's going to be effective for them. We want to be customizing the training materials around that. Take a step back even further from that, you got to ask the question, are they even ready? You know, I kind of have issue when we talk about being in the era of enablement, because in my opinion, we're not there yet.
Yep.
90% of customers and end users are still stuck in digital transformation. They never actually transformed. They're using the tools, but they're using them with old working habits. And those need to be adjusted if we're going to be able to get the most out of AI. Because let's be honest, it's not Jarvis. It's not it's not perfect.
Right.
And so we still need to have those habits in order for it to be effective.
100%. Now, something that struck me was the idea around personas and use cases and the people that are involved in early launch groups. And I get this question a lot. It's like, okay, we're finally ready to pull the trigger. How many people are going to be associated with early launch groups? How many people are we going to kick the tires with to understand what success looks like? Is there a number we can come up with? Is there a number that exists?
So there's a lot of research around, you know, pilot groups and what that number looks like. I'm in favor of 10% because that helps look at your organization, right? We can't just say at first it was 300, right? Because that's how many licenses that you had to get. So every pilot was 300. But now, you know, if you're a 10,000 person organization, the pilot group size is going to be different than if you're a 500 person organization. So 10% at least gives you a rough ballpark on where to start with. But really, the reason I say that is because the bigger the organization, the chances are you're going to have different personas, more groups of people working differently. And if you want to have an effective pilot, you need to give the tool to those people that are actually going to be using it. You know, everyone wants to give it to 10 people from IT and check that box.
How many of you have 10 people in your organization?
Wait.
Okay.
If you only have 10 people, then that's great for your pilot. Yeah.
What about C-levels? What about IT? Is that a good group? Just give it to them?
They're going to want it, and you're going to need to give it to them, but they're not going to be the right people to use it because chances are they are not using the Microsoft tools in the best way. So you may have to check that box because they've got that seat and they need it, and they need to be able to using it. But for the pilot group to really test that ROI, you need to have the average end user from the different areas of your organization testing it.
Yeah, and I'll pile on there for a second with the ROI. So at my purest form, I'm a data nerd. And I work with a lot of customers where we're trying to drive return on investment. So if I just say, hey, look, I'm going to make you more productive, try pitching that to your CFO when you're looking for $2 million worth of Copilot licenses. Well, you're going to be more productive, right? Some of you are laughing already because you know exactly how that conversation is going to go. So the reality is we need to figure out how do we quantify that. And I think the more diverse your group is, the better your use cases are. And it's very interesting what you can find. And really what's important is, at the end of the day, is figuring out the language that everyone speaks. So when we look at reclaiming those hours that from productivity gains, how do we turn that into some type of value that matches up with the dollar figure?
Yeah, we have a customer that they had someone in their sales group that actually, Copilot saved them 5 hours a week, right? You tell someone, oh, it saves 5 hours a week. That's meaningless. What does that mean? Well, last year, he was able to do 10 calls in 1 hour. Now with Copilot, he's able to do 20 calls in that same hour. So he had actual, an example of not just what he could accomplish, but the revenue that was tied to that. So it's those types of use cases that you can get from a pilot group that's going to get you that investment.
So we talked a little bit about, that 10% number. And now kind of switching to like figuring out who gets it. There's a way we can quantify that as well, like through an efficiency score. And how important is that?
Yes, I love the efficiency score. So this is something that Dominick and I actually made together. A lot of people, we talk about the people side of technology and then the tech side, right? But if we keep those separate, we're never gonna get what we really can out of it. And so what we've done is we put those two together. And we look at the usage of the Microsoft tenant, because Dominick said AI is pulling from the tenant, right? So we need to see how are they using it now. And then it's those users that fall into that team collaboration, at least the team collaborator. Those are the ones that are getting the best use cases out of AI because they're using the tool. So, you can see a few things listed there. We've got, individual contributor. That means you're working out of OneDrive, you're sending some chat messages, you're not really using the full length of the tool. How many of you out there can confess, are you an individual contributor? Anyone not really using it? All right, we got one there.
Appreciate the honesty. Very much appreciate the honesty.
You're not alone, because most people that migrated to these tools, they did it in the pandemic, they did it quickly, and everyone did the best they could, but they never really made it to that next level. So there's going to be fewer people in your organization that are actually posting in Teams channels, getting the most out of meetings, and doing that extra stuff. But those are the ones that are using the tools enough where if you give them Copilot, they're going to actually be able to really test it and see if there's ROI there.
That's really interesting. You mentioned something about the pandemic, and I think it's safe to say that, over the course of the years here, our work structure, our collaborative behaviors, they have transformed over time, especially, Dominick, you had mentioned something to me a while back about the return to work and just the way like that influences this efficiency score. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. So before I start this, what I want to make sure is that I'm not against return to work or return to office, but return to office is changing how people are collaborating. So even if it was for a short period of time, everyone was digital back in March 2020. But now we're back in the office and it's very easy. And even the three of us, we work remotely. So we don't see each other on a regular basis. But the last 2 days we've been together and I just turn around, look behind me and say to Michael, hey, Michael, can you update me about so-and-so customer? Kristen, hey, I just uploaded this project deliverable for you to take a look at. But these conversations are taking place. But if they're not memorialized somewhere, AI will never use it. So at some point, we were able to have all these conversations back and forth, whether that was in a recorded meeting, or maybe it was within a Teams channel, or even a private chat. But if I don't take the time to take that conversation that I had at the water cooler and that decision that was made and memorialize it somewhere, we'll never be able to go back and look at it with AI. And in fact, for many of you, maybe you're having your staff meetings in person, and that's wonderful. But is anyone recording that? So we have a transcript that we can go back and look at the action items and track them. So what's really important here, when we look at the collaboration efficiency score, based off of roles, based on what your policies are about return to office, that's going to have an adjustment on what that looks like. And it's not a bad thing, but it's just an idea of where we maybe need to start to focus a little bit of time to make sure that we're getting the most out of the platform. So just something for little food for thought there.
And, sometimes it doesn't have to be a big change, but, let's say you've got that staff meeting in the office. Well, in the past, you maybe have someone taking notes and they're going to send an email out after, right? Well, now in that email, only the people that were, on that email that AI is going to be able to talk to that. But maybe this is something that actually should be more public. Maybe it should be posted in a Teams channel or a SharePoint site or somewhere else. So just asking that, working more transparently, that means that if people are allowed to have access to that information, then now AI can talk to it. So it's a small shift in behavior, but it matters a lot.
And remember, private one-on-one chats in Teams, when you add a third person to the group, you cannot ever share the chat history. Mm-hmm. So it will always be trapped. Mm-hmm. Always. That's really important to think about.
I like what you said there, Kristen. Like, it doesn't have to be big change. Small baby steps are important. So we talked about a lot of stuff here. I want to know, like, from the technical and from the end user side, we'll start with the technical. What does success look like? If you're to summarize it, like, think about the customers, the organizations that we work with. What are the most successful organizations look like, those implementations? What's that look like? What's that journey look like?
I think it's really important that AI is very new. And what's very interesting is we spend a lot of time with customers that think they know more, right? They're not as open to ideas and different ways of thinking about things. They want to rush to get a pilot out. They don't want to look at the data and all that stuff. If any of you know the name Matthew Roche, he's really big in the data space at Microsoft. He's a product manager there. He'll tell you, he said, your feelings are invalid if there's data present, right? I feel that our organization does this. I feel our organization does that. But our data tells us a different story. So just taking some time and looking through that and making some actionable decisions as a result has really proven to be true. And time again, customers that come back with Copilot and they say, this sucks, it doesn't work. I go look at their collaboration score and it's at the bottom.
Mm-hmm. Well, and let's be fair, a lot of these customers, nobody has a perfect scenario, right? Mm-hmm. So we get that sometimes you're getting pressure from above and they're saying you need to add this tool and you need it yesterday. And so no situation is ever perfect, but the customers that we have found the most success with are the ones that have, at least, even if they didn't have all the time in the world, they still listened to the small bits of advice that we were able to offer. Here's a small one. You're going to have a pilot group. Ask them to opt in. Even if you pick, oh, we're going to do it with these 100 users, leadership said, even if you have those 100, by asking them to opt in, you are now asking them to take part in it. You're telling them, this is what I expect of you, these things. If you can't commit to that, then don't do it. And actually, with the customer, in my opinion, is we've had the most success with, they did this opt-in approach. They had 10 people that did email back and say, hey, you know what, I'm going to be out of office. I'm on a big project. I don't have the time to commit to a proper pilot right now. And so I'd say, we've been doing this a while. There's a lot of research out there. Mm-hmm. Just listen to all the good advice because it really makes a big difference.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. So as we kind of wrap up here, I want to leave with some top takeaways and also some call to actions. So the very first one we talked about from the technical sense is data matters, right? Like, the first thing we should be doing here is trying to find that visibility into the data state. And I always say, like, what's the first thing you got to do when you're lost in the woods? It's figure out where you're at. So go out and figure out, what does your data estate look like, and how can it be better prepared for this technology? Second, data is nothing without enabling the end users to use it. So we've got to cater, we've got to provide them with the proper approach, the proper tools to lead the way. Third, here, this is a new era, right? We've gotten here very, very quickly. There was a lot of hype around this, and we've got to attenuate it. But as we talked about here, there's behaviors, there's norms, there's thought processes, there's dirty little things that we have done, and now we're getting that spotlight is being shining upon this sort of thing. And so it takes a lot of change, and we have to acknowledge that and take those tiny little steps towards that change to make us better. So it is past time, right? So we have to figure out ways to embrace this. So have those conversations with the SHI team, have those conversations internally, and come up with a game plan. What are we going to do to lead in this era? We know this technology is here, so how are we going to approach it? And with that, I think we have 5 minutes left for questions. If we have any questions, let's have them. Thank you. Not all at once.
You're not going to let us off the hook that easy. Come
Guys
on.
are-
Come
Had a
on.
long day. There we
I
go.
got a couple there.
All right.
Hey, my name's Chase. So in the deployment of Microsoft 365 Copilot licenses, would you say that it would be better to opt in for a broad approach, deploying it to an entire group, or specific people in a group, but you can hit more groups? So if you have 10,000 total licenses, how would you separate those out within an organization?
Oh, good question. I'm going to give my opinion, that I'm curious if it's the same that you would suggest. I think there's value to both. If you stick with, let's say, one group, let's say you have a large sales group, right? And you say, all right, we're going to give it to this amount of people, all in sales. Well, the chances are you're going to get a lot more information about that group when it comes to the return on investment, the use cases, and all of that. So that could be extremely valuable if they are if that group is an area of your organization that maybe brings in a lot of revenue, really important, high visibility across the org. So that could be very valuable, but you're only getting information about one group of people. So then you might have to redo the whole thing with someone else. So really, I'd say there's value in both. It just depends on, are you in it for the long game? Are you going to start with that one group and then go on to other people? If that's the case, then starting broad could be great, because then you're really going to get more data out of that ROI. But what do you think, Dom?
No, my opinion is Kristen's right. Absolutely right. The other thing I would add is I think some groups that you have within your organization, they may not collaborate in Microsoft 365, and that's also okay. I've got a couple of orgs that they use different tools for different things, particularly because it's a system of record or whatever it might be. And that's okay that those people aren't necessarily there. So maybe they're not the place you would start. So I would say probably a blend of what Kristen just said was, you know, be a little bit broad if you're looking for those use cases, or if you've got very ripe areas to find some value, go after them. Either way works. It's just, are you playing the short or long game, essentially?
How do we identify champions, like those that are potential champions with this technology?
Combination of the collaboration score. So that right there, the data tells us who should be in those pilot groups. That's a great place to start. But champions, I always recommend you want a combination of volunteer, voluntold, right? So you've got the people that you're like, hey, you're a great collaborator, or you have high visibility in the org. People listen to you. You want those people as your champions. But you also want to open the door to people that are just excited about the tools. And a lot of people will volunteer to do that extra legwork because they get early access to the tools and they're really excited about it.
Good. Another question over here. Back room.
Okay.
Do you know the reason why Copilot's tied to current channel instead of semi-annual? In my experience, the current channel can change every month.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's been a challenge for some organizations, that rapid change that's taking place.
So for those who didn't hear,
why, but do we? Oh yes.
why is Copilot tied to the current channel?
Yeah, well, I think the whole reason is, like, if you go look at the roadmaps out there right now, you look at June 2024 and what's coming out for Copilot in the next month, it's huge. I mean, obviously a lot of it was pent up from Microsoft Build at the end of last month. It's coming out. So there's a lot of changes. There's a lot of iterations that are coming through. And as a result, that's why the current channel is big. How many of you have been frustrated with Copilot for Excel only working in tables? Guess what? June, there's some stuff coming to help you out with that. So I think that's part of where you're starting to see that is that it needs to be a little bit more innovative. And it's kind of pushing forward.
It's new. They need to have all of the updates to have it be effective. So it'd be interesting to see if they end up changing that down the road once it's a bit more cooked, and or it could be a good incentive for people to get on that faster channel. So
Yeah, I don't see, just in the past few months, the acceleration of how much this technology is changing, how much we're piling onto it, adding capabilities. Keep your eyes open. Like, this is just the beginning for Copilot for M365. There's so much that we're starting to drive into this AI hub.
And that's why it's important to
Yeah.
pilot to the right people,
Right.
because it is changing so fast. And so if you get 10 people looking at it and they don't like it, and then you throw it out, well, it's, you gotta keep revisiting it, because from what it looks like now versus what it looked like 3 months ago, it is way more effective, and it's going to keep getting that way.
Absolutely.
Great.
All right.
I think that is it. Appreciate the time. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Steve.